Bite-Size PL, professional learning you can consume during lunch or on a dog walk or while you draw a picture. Our goal is to provide meaningful, engaging, and brief conversations for educators. I'm Jared, and my co-host today is Kate.
Hey, Jared, excited to draw a picture today.
Yes, and it's going to be a fun time doing that because our guest today is Chad Crane, who is an art teacher and instructional coach at Layton High School.
Good morning. Very glad to be here. Thank you.
We wanted to start out by talking about how you got into education because you didn't have a traditional route in becoming a teacher. So why don't you start by telling us how you got here?
Yeah, you bet. I was studying at the University of Utah. I was getting an MFA in drawing and painting, and I was at the point that whole experience was coming to an end, and I was getting kicked out into the real world. There's no more school for me to do. I was looking at two different jobs. One was a medical recruiter in Park City doing sales. I went and sat in a chair and put the headphone on and mirrored what I'd be doing, and I felt like a rat in a cage. It was like the path I did not want to go down. And then I had other options where I went and got an ARL license, and what that means is I didn't have a teaching license for high school, but I had a little piece of paper that said, if you hire Chad Crane, he will eventually become a real teacher. And I started interviewing at high schools, and I was going to do one of those two things. And I got a job at Copper Hills, and I bawled my eyes out because it meant that I wasn't going to have to do medical recruiting and do sales, and I could keep talking about the thing that I care so much about, and that it wasn't like this little dream that had to come to an end,
So those were tears of joy then.
Tears of joy. And so I started teaching at Copper Hills. Day one, fed to the wolves. I had zero training on how to be a teacher, none. I just became one. And that was my introduction to teaching high school. And in hindsight, I'm so happy it turned out that way. Because as an ARL candidate, I didn't have the slightest clue there was such thing as a state standard for art. I had no idea where my curriculum was coming from. It came from me. So I approached art like an artist, not like a teacher. I went into the classroom, had my kids do some drawings, day one, looked at the drawings and was like, oh, this is what you don't get. Oh, this is what I need to teach you. And that's how I designed my curriculum. I had no idea that there was stuff I was supposed to be teaching kids. I just knew what I needed to teach them as an artist for them to make better art.
Well, I'm really excited to kind of talk about that. I know that we're going to dive into creativity a little bit here, which I think is super fun to be talking to an art teacher about creativity. I have not one artistic bone in my body, but I've been in your classroom. I've watched you teach. I see that nice little creative flow thing that you have going, which any teacher wants in their class. I taught science, I taught math, and I still want that creative flow happening. I know that you have a phrase called early wins. I know you kind of want to talk about what that means for learning and maybe how that applies to art and all learners across content.
Early wins, and it's a phrase a lot of us use, but it's crucial. It means that instantly students feel successful, more successful than they probably ever thought they were going to feel in an art class, especially for an elective class where the students need 1.5 credits. And I have students take a painting class for so many reasons. Some of them love it. Some of them just want the credit. And they're trying to get in and get out. And my goal is to do something with them day one, day two, as quickly as possible, that makes them feel like a better artist than they ever thought they could be.
Well, because I imagine you've got some students that come in that make a statement like Kate just did. I don't have one artistic bone in my body.
Over and over. Yes.
Same I don't do math. Mm-hmm. I'm not a math person.
It's true.
It's like, okay, trying to build that no, you are. Let's get an early win.
So it's because we have these early experiences somewhere in education that have taught us that door is closed. To have a fixed mindset about the thing and math or whatever it is, it's game over early on. We decide that door is closed to me, that I don't belong there. And I just don't believe any of that when it comes to art. My job is to convince you otherwise, right? So if you were in my class, I'd be like, let's find that creative bone because I bet there is one.
Do you feel like you have kind of honed this skill within your content of finding something that's going to make them feel like an artist really fast, kind of that high reward activity? I mean, that's the goal, right?
Yeah. I think I'm pretty good at it at this point. Pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And that in each of my classes, I've designed a project that's the first one we do that allows most people to feel successful.
Grow.
The skill is something that they can access quickly, right? And then they actually make something cool with it. And if they can feel that success early on, by the time I'm challenging them with deeper, more robust skills, they remember. There's like this memory of, oh yeah, I was good early on. I can be good again.
Oh, I feel like this applies to all content.
Well, so do
Well,
I.
of course,
Yeah,
it
you
does.
catch that spark of, oh, I can do math, or oh, science is interesting. Like I just had a question and answered it myself. You try to give them that feeling really early on.
You really do. And just to insert this little comment there is, I did door-to-door sales for 5 years, right, and trained salesmen. One thing I learned really quickly on the doors is in seconds, someone sold. Either I, as the salesman, sell the person on why they need what I'm selling, or they sell me on why they don't. And I believe the exact same thing happens in your classroom. Within seconds, students are either convinced and can sell you that, yeah, it doesn't matter what you're teaching me, or you convince them that it does matter, and it has to happen quickly, like as if it's a door-to-door sales.
Oh, absolutely.
You know.
And almost every day.
Every
right?
day,
Like
yeah.
every day there's this new, like, we're making this pitch. I love that. Sell the couch, as my colleague Allison likes to say.
That's cool.
So I want to dive into another kind of part of creativity that I think is lots of teachers can relate to, which is this dead zone that comes when you feel like you give autonomy to your students. And what you are met with is, I don't know what to do. I have no ideas. I don't know how to, I can't just generate something from nothing. You know, we think we're allowing students autonomy and we're like, do whatever you want. And they just sit there kind of paralyzed. And so, so much of creativity is not only like generating ideas, but kind of that whole process of like having an idea, realizing it's an idea, capitalizing on that idea, and then implementing it. So how do you make that part of creativity, idea generation, like into a system that students can, concretely access?
I love that. If you're just like, hey, be creative. And that is a huge challenge, and it's overwhelming and even a little scary, right? So how do you make it a process? I think that's crucial, is to make it something where the target isn't exactly creativity, but at a slant angle, we'll approach creativity by doing this process. And the indirect result will be, hey, you made something that looks a lot like something creative. It may or may not be, but it's almost indistinguishable in the end by creating a process to help you get there. One of mine is automatic writing, which...
So wait,
yes.
you just said that as an art teacher.
This is true. I use words a lot. And here's one reason why. Let's say I'm having my students try to do something, like a student wants to make a painting about global warming. And I'm like, what does that look like? How do you draw global warming? Well, all of us right here are sitting here like, I don't know. That's kind of hard to do. But if you can just capture the idea by writing global warming on a piece of paper, then you just captured the idea. And all we're doing is keeping track of our ideation. It's very Daniel Kahneman, right? Like thinking fast and thinking slow. I try to have my students think really quickly in the beginning. So in our automatic writing exercises, it looks something like this. I show my students a picture of this painting by Salvador Dali. It has a horse in it. And I say, okay, you got 1 minute. And in 1 minute, I want you to write down 30 words, not sentences, just lists of words that come to your mind. No rhyme or reason. You don't have to justify the word at all. It's free word association, right? And this is challenging. And I give them a big number on purpose. Like 30 is almost too much. That's one word every 2 seconds, So it's a big challenge. And then we practice this. And it's really powerful because after students try it out, I say, okay, how many of you got 15 words? How many of you guys got 20 words? And we see who got, little or a lot. And then I say, okay, what's the first word on your list? And inevitably, it's horse, right? Because there literally are horses in this painting. And it's always the first or second, third word in there, horse. And I say, raise your hand if you have horse on there. Every hand that goes up in the room. We all started in the exact same place, right? The obvious place. And then I say, who wants to share with us the last word? And it is something bonkers. I mean, it is out there. You could never predict that word. It'd be something like trilobite, or something like that. I'm like, who has trilobite on there? Nobody in the room. And it's this amazing demonstration of what happens when you think past the obvious entry points to any problem, right? But when you think with words first, because words can keep up with the pace of ideation. They're fast. I always say, throw a big net. Like we are just tossing the net overboard. We're hauling everything up. And then later we can go through and search for the mackerels and sardines and sort according to fish and say, this one's gross. I don't need this one. I didn't mean to catch this hammerhead shark. But you throw a huge net first and then haul it up and then figure out what you got. Do you care if I keep going? Because I want to tie this into one more concept.
Bring it in.
Okay. Persistence hunting. I'd like to talk about that right here. It's from this book, Born to Run, by Christopher McDougall. This is a book about running, but for me, it's a book about creativity. And he shares this crazy, wild idea of persistence hunting. The idea that tribes could actually get together and marathon run, slow trot, run a deer to death. And that's how they were able to hunt. Like a cheetah will run way faster than humans, but that we were built to run at a slow pace for long distances because we can regulate our breath, we can sweat. Go watch a dog on a hot day in the park. It'll go crazy running after everything, but then within 10 minutes, it's in the shade panting, right? Because it can't regulate its temperature like we can. We can run for a long time. And if we run in packs and keep the deer moving over time, the deer can't regulate its body temperature and it basically just drops dead from heat exhaustion. Now, is this true? I don't ever care if things are true. I only care if they're useful, right? It's useful to me as a metaphor for how to be creative. If you can teach a student to not give up at the obvious entry point for any problem, you're writing an essay and it's about this topic, well, they're probably going to come up with one idea. That's called seize and freeze. You seize and freeze on the one idea you have and you're like, that's good enough. I at least got one. But what else is there? What would happen if that student continued thinking about that topic longer than any other rational student would do so? What's past that point of almost a ludicrous persistence to hunt that idea down until it drops dead and you eat its heart? The point is you're trying to tap into what you don't know that you don't know. Keep thinking, keep pushing. What else is there past the point where you would like to stop? There's something there. In this book, he talks about marathon monks that run over the course of 1,000 days, like a marathon every day. And again, true or not, I don't know. But the stories are that some of these monks have seen each other glowing, that at the end of this run, they'll stop on top of a mountain and they can hear a pinprick across the valley, that they almost become superhuman through this effort. Is that true? I don't know because I'm not willing to run that much.
Some of us not at all.
Not at all. I'll never know. But for students, what is there on your paper you're trying to write, on your art project that you're thinking about? If you're willing to keep going and keep going and keep going and exhaust all the obvious entry points, is there something magical there? You don't know unless you go there.
Well, I've got something to go along with this. So I was diving into the whole creativity piece, and I found this is from Julian Shapiro, and he says, I call this approach the creativity faucet. Visualize your creativity as a backed up pipe of water. The first mile is backed up with wastewater. This wastewater must be emptied before clear water arrives. Because your pipe has only one faucet, there's no shortcut to achieving clarity, other than first emptying the wastewater. Let's apply this to creativity. At the beginning of a writing session, write out every bad idea that unavoidably comes to mind. Instead of being self-critical and resisting them, recognize bad ideas as progress. Once the bad ideas are emptied, strong ideas begin to arrive. Here's my guess as to why. Once you've generated enough bad output, your mind reflexively identifies which elements cause the badness. Then it becomes good at avoiding them. You start pattern matching interesting and novel ideas with greater intuition. Most creators resist their bad ideas and never reach the clear water. If you've opened a blank document, scribbled a few thoughts, then walked away because you weren't struck with gold, then you too never got past it. Neil Gaiman and Ed Sheeran know that they're not superhuman. In every creative session, they simply have the discipline to allot time for emptying the wastewater. They're not worrying about whether clear water will eventually arrive. It always does.
Heck yes. I believe it. And in a roundabout way, that's what we were just talking about, right? Persistence hunting, a way to empty out that mucky water. It's true of almost anyone. If you look at, when I went to France, I was able to see the Picasso Museum, right? And in there, they collected, I swear, every napkin he sneezed on became art. You know what I mean? And just, there's so much stuff. And not all of it's great. But what he did was produce a lot of stuff. You know, one of the old sayings about poetry is you can't write a good poem until you've written 100 poems. You got to write 100 to write one good one. 100 bad ones for one good one. Same idea of emptying out the water, right? And it's true. Produce a lot. Don't go for the masterpiece mentality, but produce a lot.
I love this idea of bringing this into teaching, teaching students this concept and then giving them the way to do that with your writing, with, having them generate those ideas. It's like I'm giving you the concrete way to get where we need to go, which I think is going to be so valuable. All right, let's talk about two terms that get thrown around a lot in learning. Talent and inspiration, kind of that, you got it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that and how they relate to what we've been talking about with creativity?
Talent just gets in the way. It's a non-starter for a teacher because I can't teach you talent. I can't give you that. By the way, there's no empirical evidence that talent exists. Like I was listening to a book recently. He brought that point up. He's like, where's the study that proves that talent is even a thing? It's not there. And maybe we believe it, and I kind of believe it too, but it's just not a useful concept for a teacher. Instead, I'd rather teach a kid to be curious. I'd rather teach a kid to be persistent, dogged, right? I'd rather teach a kid a strategy, a bit like automatic writing, be quick to start, slow to finish, strategies to help them. I can teach them those things, but I really can't teach talent. And what I've found is sometimes when a kid has been told over and over that they are talented, that becomes a fixed mindset.
Right.
And they show up and they want me to pat them on the back for existing and for making whatever they're doing, probably some cool anime dude with a sword, and big eyes and hair, and I don't even know. And they want me to be impressed with that, and they don't want to grow because they are talented. It really gets in the way, honestly, when it comes to school. As far as inspiration, waiting for that is a waste of time, I believe. It's just, instead you take action. I like to use the metaphor of playing chess a lot when it comes to making anything, whether it's writing a poem, an essay, or making a painting. If I sat there with the chessboard in front of us, Jared, you and I are playing, and it's my turn to move, the very first move, and I waited for inspiration. And I waited to make sure I knew how I was going to win this game against you before I ever moved a pawn forward. Nothing would happen. Nothing would happen. Instead, I just got to move a pawn forward. And then I got to wait for you to move your pawn forward, and then I respond to that. And so I try to teach my students to don't wait for inspiration. Respond to something. So get something on the page, right? Get something there. Write something, draw something, do a thumbnail sketch, try something. And if it's not right, then that's stimuli that you respond to and you shift and you go this way and you go that way. But you got to move a pawn forward. You can't sit there and wait for the game to get started. You have to start the game. And I try to have them really think of their paintings or their drawings like almost a living entity that has its own will and is playing chess against you, and respond against it. It's going to give you moves to make and counter moves, and it's going to ask for something and you'll say no, and it'll ask for something else and you'll say yes, and you have this relationship with it. In the same way we'd be responding to each other if we were playing chess.
I think what you've talked about here with all of these strategies is they fit in an art class, but they also fit in every class. And one of the key things we do as teachers is teach strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really one of the best things we do, that equips students for wherever they end up and whatever they're doing, so that they can look at any situation and then make some determinations and then know how to move forward.
I think in the end, don't we all want our kids to be more creative, more divergent thinkers, respond in unique ways according to their life experiences? That's what we want. I just don't know if all of us actually give them a chance to produce that. But we should.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I want my students to have more grit, more persistence, right? I remember when I was in college, it was all about innovative science. You show them something and then they're going to discover it. They're going to ask the questions. They're going to try to find the answers. And I was like, yeah, this is how I want my class to go. Day one, open up something, right? I showed them this phenomenon with these termites. I brought termites in the room. I was like, look at what these termites are doing. This is so cool. Dead on delivery.
Really?
It was like, they couldn't.
Classic.
You had to teach the skill first. You had to teach the skill first. And I think that's such an important thing. I think sometimes as teachers, we have a tendency when we want creativity or persistence or grit, we have a tendency to assume it's there.
Yeah.
And get frustrated when it's not. Right? We get frustrated like, oh, this is your fault. Like, you should ask the question. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Try something. And students are like,
oh yeah.
It's like, it's pulling teeth. And so I think sometimes we have to take a step back and do those things that concretely teach the skill that we hope for them to display in our class, because otherwise we'll just find ourselves getting frustrated. And then we throw something like, innovation, out the door. Yeah. Oh, they're not ready for it.
They're not ready for it.
Well, get them ready for it, because you're right. They're not ready for it.
Get them ready. I love what you just said there. It's scaffolding. When it comes to teaching a skill, like let's say, foiling an equation, we understand we need to scaffold that skill. But the creative side needs to be scaffolded as well, right? And help them get there instead of just drop them off and be like, go play in the park. You need to help build that. And I had the opportunity to do that with a group of engineers that hired me as a creative consultant, because smart guys. I mean, these guys are engineers that are really intelligent, but as a group, they got together and they were so logical, so left brain, that they didn't know how to generate new ideas. Because the second someone said something, they'd be like, no, that won't work because of physics. I don't know. Like, it wouldn't work, right? And so they brought me in to help them be more functional as a team. And I just taught them strategies on how they can brainstorm. Teach your students strategies. Have them start right brain and move left brain. Don't be critical up front, right? No judgment up front. Generate tons of ideas. Sort through that to the good idea. Start with words, then move to pictures. All of this, right? All of this are the strategies I use to help my students actually create things that are a bit more creative. At the same time, every one of those projects has a concrete skill, like here's how you render an object with 3-dimensional light and shadow. Because a good idea, poorly executed or not captured with the right skill, is a tragedy. How many people do you know that have had great ideas for books, but they haven't written them? Because they simply haven't developed the skill to write it.
Absolutely. Those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So letting them shed that fear of being right while building the skill. So when they come together and they're ready to create something.
Yeah. If those two things can marry right there, I mean, you got something magical.
And that's not just art. That's great science. Yeah. That's great writing.
Absolutely.
That's great math. That's great. All of that.
It is
when those come together. Well, this has just been a joy. We like to end episodes with a gift from our guest, and we wish we could actually give a gift to our listeners, but we can't. So do you have a gift that's making you happy right now?
Writing is making me really happy right now. And it's funny that I'm a visual artist, But I found myself sort of like leaning over into this world of writing, because you can write anywhere, anytime. And like I said, words can keep up with the pace of ideation. And so I've been writing, well, I'll just tell you, I wrote one haiku every day for an entire year. It was a creative challenge I gave myself. And talk about persistence hunting, man. Like, after 2 months of that, you've written 60 something, and you're like, seriously? What's left? It was magical. That year was one of the best years of my life. And I actually remember when I read one of those haiku, the recall is intense. I can see it. Here's my gift. Write something today. It's fast. It's easy. Don't show it to anybody, but write something, and don't write it once. Give yourself a big number. I have to write 30 things. 30 haiku, 30 I want statements, 30 memories from when I was a child, 30 something. Give yourself a big number, shoot for it, and see what happens.
Well, that's a great gift to give to get us to be more and to really take this creative process that we talked about today and put it into action.
Awesome.
Chad, we really appreciate you being here with us. You have so many great thoughts for any teacher to consider, and that's fantastic. That's one of the great things about the podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our producer, Tom, for making this sound so good. This season, we're putting the video of the podcast on YouTube. You can continue listening on your favorite podcast app and also check out the video on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for that link. Thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe and share the podcast with others. See you at school.